Hi everyone. So this is my video on challenge number 3 for my Introduction to Digital Fundamentals class. The theme for this one is historical figure, and for me I chose J.R.R. Tolkien, who is a famous author who wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and many other books. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that Photoshop is open and create a new image, 300 by 300, 3000 by 3000 pixels. And then the next thing I want to do is bring in the drawing of Mr. Tolkien. And so I found this one on the internet. It's a very good drawing of him. We'll resize it here. All right. And then there's a few things that are on this that I want to get removed. So the first thing I want to do is rasterize the layer. Then I want to choose the rectangular marquee tool. I just wanted to highlight some of these things and delete. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, let's go ahead and remove some more of this. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay. Make sure that the layer is selected. I had some issues with that earlier. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image and Adjustments, and I'm going to desaturate it. Okay, you notice how it went from a kind of a beige color to a gray color. And then I'm going to go back to Image, Adjustments, and Levels this time. And I'm going to put more of the black color into it by adjusting the levels here. So you kind of see how it darkens up. You can go lighter with it. So on the left side is the blacks, on the white side is the whites. And see how the white makes it a lot whiter out, or makes it white out. Alright, but I think that's pretty good for what I want. So click OK. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go ahead and delete the background. So I don't need that. And then I'm going to bring in the textured paper image. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to drag this to the corners so that it fills in. All right. And then I'm going to take that particular layer and bring it down to the bottom. And so now we kind of have the image of Mr. Tolkien over the vintage paper. So then I'm going to go back to the photo or the image layer. I'm going to change its blend mode from normal to multiply. And so that kind of blends in the background image into that paper. All right. We'll go ahead and save it again. So the next thing we want to do is we kind of want to bring in the logo. And so the logo I found is this one. And I'm going to blow it up pretty big so that it's easier to work with. So what we're going to do next is take the rectangular lasso tool, and we're going to kind of just trace the outline of this and then fill it in with the color. So the next thing I want to do is create a new layer. so that I have something to trace against. Okay, so I just use the zoom tool to kind of zoom in a little bit. Trying to get it to a size that's a lot more manageable to work with. Alright. So it's important that we have this new layer here, because as we trace over this, it'll actually implant on that layer. So then we take the, it was polygonal lasso tool, and we're just going to kind of trace that line here. And so this is going to take a little bit of time because there's so many curves. And the more curves you have in there, the more data points that you're going to have to kind of put in place. Alright, so to add additional stuff to this one, you can hold down the shift key and you see how it has a little plus sign next to that lasso. Just click your next point and then continue clicking after you've released the shift key. And this is not going to be perfect. That's okay. It'll be close enough, and we'll kind of understand the logo here. So the logo here basically is Mr. Tolkien's initials. So you've got the J, the two R's that are reversed, and then the T itself is part of that. So like I said, Mr. Tolkien is one of my favorite authors. I started reading The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings when I was about 8 years old. And back in the 80s, they had several computer games that I enjoyed playing. I was kind of happy when they came out with the movies that Peter Jackson did. So if you're not familiar with them, so I just used the backspace to reset to my last data point. Like I was saying, if you're not if you're not familiar with who J.R.R. Tolkien is, he was he's a British citizen, or was a British citizen, that was a Oxford professor after World War I. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong because it's been a while since I've actually watched the movies and studied up on them, but he was an English professor. He created his own languages, and he was very interested in medieval or myths. And so that was kind of the basis of why he wrote The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, was because he felt that England needed its own mythology. So King Arthur kind of was well, it's attributed to French myth and not English myth. And so he wrote The Hobbit for one, for his children, but also to kind of have that mythology. Alright, the next section I want to do is I'm actually going to do these little dots here. So we'll go ahead and do all of these. Okay, and so now I want to basically remove these white spots from there. So I'm going to do the deselection of it. Not really sure why that didn't take, but let's try that again. There we go. So it looks like when you are deselecting an area, you don't necessarily have to do the shift key to do additional ones. But when you want to do the plus section, you do. Alright. Alright, so now that we've got that settled, and we've got layer 1, we're going to come over to the gradient and we're going to choose paint bucket. And we're going to choose a color. So I'm going to try to match something to this background as best I can. Okay. And by default it did everything that was selected. So now I'm going to do Control D to deselect it. Okay, and then I'm going to hide this layer here. And then I'm going to use the Move tool and the T. So I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. And I'm just going to set it aside over here a little bit. Shrink it some more. Let's see. Let's make sure that kind of fits into the picture. Okay. Press enter. Now we'll go back to the zoom. So press Z and then fit to screen here. Alright. And then let's move it again. So I pressed V. So I'm going to move this again. Actually, no, that's pretty good. Let's do Control T. We'll resize it just slight. Okay. Alright, that's good. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to, we'll double click the layer over here in the empty spot, and we're going to add a drop shadow to it. And you can adjust the size of the shadow itself, how far out it goes. with the spread, and the distance shows how far it goes out from behind it. So we want it pretty close to the original. All right, just press OK. All right. And then we want to kind of, there's opacity and there's fill, and if you mess with the opacity, it'll basically just make it transparent, along with the shadow. What we want to do is change the fill. So the fill keeps the shadow. And I want to set it to about 50. And let's go 60. Yeah, let's go 75. All right, and that's kind of where I want it at, 75. So I'll go ahead and save it. All right. And so far we've done desaturate. That's their image adjustments and desaturate. We also did the levels, so we made it a little bit darker, so that was their image adjustments and levels. We deleted the background that was originally there. We changed the blend mode to multiply so that the image flowed into the vintage paper background. We added the logo. We added a new layer and then used the polygonal lasso tool on the logo. And then we chose the paint bucket to fill in the logo. We deselected it. We double clicked on the layer itself in the empty space area. Added a drop shadow. And then we adjusted the fill layer of the logo down to about 75%. Okay, so that's where we are so far. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to add a kind of a border along the sides. So we're going to do another new layer. And then I'm going to go to the gradient tool. I'm going to double click, actually I'm sorry, single click here. And then this is my custom gradient that I've done. So I'm kind of happy with the green to brown to green. Alright, and I'm going to choose the diamond shape. I'm going to make sure that layer 2 is selected. I'm just going to come in here and kind of go at an angle to it. Alright, and then this one also we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. Okay, so that we can do the marquee tool, and we're going to kind of just eyeball it and come up with a little rectangle here. Alright, and then inside of the intersection we're going to right click and we're going to do layer via cut, and so that creates 2 layers out of this. And you can kind of tell that it did a cut because you can kind of see the outline here. Okay, so we're going to change the fill rate of this layer down to nothing. Okay, and then we're also going to double click on this one and create a drop shadow for that. Let's adjust the angle a little bit. Maybe the size just slightly. Press OK. Alright. So that's pretty much it. I believe that is 8 different techniques that we learned. So we have the desaturate levels. We have the multiply blend mode. The polygonal lasso tool we used. The paint bucket we used. We did a deselection and resized. We added a drop shadow and we changed the fill. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure we save this as a PSD file and also as a JPEG. Alright, so I appreciate you watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And I'll have all the URLs posted with this as well. Alright, so thank you, and y'all take care.